All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Looks like we have a few people joining the call today, which is great. A few new people as well, so welcome to this month's WEBtips. Let's just go ahead and get started here. Just some housekeeping items as we get going. So everyone is going to be on mute during this webinar, and if we have the opportunity for some discussion, feel free to raise your hand during the presentation by using the GoToMeeting option. There's a little icon that says raise hand, and we'll try to get the questions. I think I might be the only one from Clear Process today manning the presentation, so I'll flip back and forth between the presentation and to see if anyone has their hand up to answer questions as best as I can, or otherwise get back to you after the session is over. So we will have a couple polls during this topic. So I'll display a poll. You can answer a question, and we'll just use it to guide the discussion a little bit. I think we'll have 2 questions today. And again, if you have questions, feel free to type them in, and we'll do the best. We can to get those questions answered during that time. So what is WEBtips? Again, it looks like there's a few new people, so I'll go over the introduction here. So WEBtips is Clear Process's method of staying engaged with the Winshuttle community. This is a free service for anyone that has Winshuttle, anyone that doesn't have Winshuttle that's interested in learning more about it. But the purpose is for us to work with the Winshuttle community to show some of the things that they're interested in learning around the tool, and some of the things that we're learning that are neat based upon the project we're doing with our customers. So it's just the tips and tricks, half-hour, 40-minute session to learn a few tips and tricks on the Winshuttle tools. So on every other month, we do tips and tricks that are based upon query and transaction and direct, so the desktop-based tools, and we throw in some form interaction with those tools as well. But on the other months, we're focused on the foundation platform, which is the forms and workflow, and understanding tips and tricks on those. So for this month, you're stuck with me. And just to introduce myself, my name is Lance Yoder. I've been working with Clear Process Solutions here for a couple years now, and I've been an SAP user for a long time prior to joining Clear Process, where I was using the Winshuttle tools in industry as a Winshuttle customer before I joined this company. And I started out, just what we're going to be talking about here with transaction and query and the desktop tools, and I've been pretty successful with it along the way, and joined Clear Process to focus my career on business process improvement using the Winshuttle tools. So here we are today. So talking about the WEBtips for March, we're just going to sort of keep it simple. We're going to have a little demonstration. We're going to cover the main topic is working with difficult scripts. Using some of those other features that people may not know are out there, or just giving some general guidance. We're not going to go through a Tcode specific, like this is how you do this Tcode. What we're going to try to do is this is how you can accomplish these types of problems. Obviously, we're going to use certain Tcodes as a demonstration point, but the real purpose is to understand the scenarios that you're facing and some of the unique ways to get around those problems. All right, so jumping right into the first topic, Gui Scripting. Sometimes it just doesn't seem like we're going to have any other way to do something unless we use Gui Scripting. All right, so we're going to debunk a little bit of these options here by exploring some of the Tcodes that people often have problems with, looping, can't find what we need to do, long text, things like that. That's what we'll look at today. And especially, I think this is an important topic for those of you that were at the Winshuttle user group, the conference that was in Las Vegas just a month or so ago. They announced that come June, Gui Scripting is not going to be supported on the Winshuttle integration server. So if you're still running it from your desktop, that's going to continue. If you're using Gui Scripting from the desktop, that's not a problem. It's if you're using the integration server, interacting with forms and workflow, where you're trying to schedule scripts on the server, you're not going to be able to use Gui Scripting on the integration server anymore. So I thought this would be a good topic to discuss. Maybe there's some other options around Gui Scripting. Okay, so we're going to start out that discussion with one of our polls here. So let me get one of these polls going, and let's see if I can launch one of these polls here. All right, so the question we're talking about for this poll is, does your company enable Gui Scripting in production where you're going to have to use it? And I know David might be enabled there, but it's no good if you can't use it in production. So that's the question. How many companies are using Gui Scripting, or if you're not sure? All right, so it looks like we still got a couple votes coming in here. All right, right, looks like everyone has voted. So let's go take a look at this poll. And let's share the results. All right, so hopefully we're seeing on the screen right now that 64% of the people that are attending today said, yes, we do have Gooey Scripting. A quarter of the people said no. And we have 1 or 2 people out there that aren't sure whether they're allowed to use Gui Scripting or not. So that's actually sort of surprising for me that a high percentage of folks, over half of the folks have Gui Scripting enabled. So maybe everyone's from the same companies, and it's that. But what I've seen through projects is a lot of places we don't have Gui Scripting capabilities. Now, even at the company that I used to work for, Gui Scripting wasn't around, wasn't allowed, for whatever reason. So that's good to know. So let's see if we can hide that poll. And we should be seeing the desktop again. And if you're not seeing the desktop, feel free to chime in. I'll try to catch up. So, okay, no Gui Scripting, no problem. So let's look at one of the items that I see most commonly used for Gui Scripting out there. So alternate units of measure, and I'll say other mass updatable items, because that's sort of our key for this particular tip. So let me bring over an SAP session here, and we were going to look at alternate units of measure. So let me just maximize this. All right, so if we went into the material master to change this material 100-100 here in our demo SAP environment, I'm going to select basic data 1 and go into additional data where the units of measure reside. Okay, so in this case, I have one alternate unit of measure already. My base unit of measure is piece, and I have one alternate out here of case. Now, for those that have been using the tool for a while, we understand the concept of looping. You have to have the ability, or even if you're not looping, you need to know where you're going to put the information. So, in this case, if I want to do a transaction to record adding another unit of measure, I might record myself going in here and selecting the third row, putting in my data, and saving. I think all is well with the world. I go back to play it back again. And lo and behold, row 3 isn't available anymore because I just filled it in. So you need to be able to look for that next available line. So when Gui Scripting is not available, I see some people just go down to the bottom. All right. So when you do the recording, if you don't have any other option, well, as long as I put my data at the bottom row, after I hit enter, it'll pop up, and I can keep inserting data into the bottom row. Now that'll work to a point. Maybe for units of measure, that might be okay because what do we have here? Maybe 10, 11, 12 items. Generally, I haven't seen that many alternate units of measure, but I've seen at least one instance where they would use all sorts of units of measures to define case, pallet, packaging, barrel, all sorts of stuff. And this screen was just filled up. And when they would go back to use their script that was entering data into the last row, well, after the last row got filled up, the script stopped working because they could no longer enter a unit of measure. So one thing that we can do is, other than using Gui Scripting, which would definitely work for this because Gui Scripting scroll down and it'll capture scoring down, you can index and all of those things that Gui Scripting offers, is to use the mass update Tcode. So, mass update Tcodes are out there to help us do exactly that, mass update. I have 100 customers that I need to change the state on. I have 500 materials I need to change the MRP controller on. The mass update tool is enabling you to do lots of updates, at one time. Very good at pointing a whole bunch of objects to the same data points. We need to update all of these items to have the value of 5. That's very good for that. But you can still do one at a time things. So just because it's a mass update Tcode doesn't mean you can't use it for one-off items. So if we take a look at the mass update Tcode for the material master, which is MM17, so let me go ahead and bring that screen over here. I'm a little bit far ahead, so I'm going to back up. So when you enter the Material Master Mass Update tool, MM17, these are all of the tables that you have the ability to update. And notice that the unit of measure for material tables here, so MARM, that's where all of this data is stored in the background here. So this Material Master data for alternate units is stored within this data point. So let me exit this material here so I don't get locked out. And I'm going to select alternate units of measure. So I want to do an update to alternate units of measure. So I don't want to change anything. I want to create things. So I'm going to click do not change existing data. I want to create information. Put in my material. Maybe I want to do barrel this time instead of case. I already have case out there. And now I have to select all of my columns. Okay, so you can record yourself in this transaction, but what I would suggest is you define what is called a screen variant. So if you want to update, you have the denominator, the numerator, and maybe you want to do length, width, and height. So we'll do length. Width is down here. Let's put things in the right order. And we have a unit of dimension that we need to do. Okay, so we have all of these columns here, and you don't need to record yourself doing this so much, because what I would do is save this as a screen variant. So if you save as variant, you can give it a name, and we'll just give it alternate units of measure, and you can look at your options, what it's going to save to this. Okay, we don't want to save the values, we just want to save the fields. Yep, okay, selection fields, we don't want the values, we just want the fields, so that'll save that for us. Okay, so now we have this screen variant called alternate unit of measure, and it's going to save this layout for us. So if I came out of here and I backed out, and I entered the variant alt demo, it's going to take me right to that setup. Remember how I had the X over here, do not change, I want to create. I can put in my material again and my unit of measure, and it'll show those columns that I need exactly. So you don't need to record yourself adding those columns. It's best if you just create that layout in advance, and then you can record yourself putting information to column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on. Now when you record this, Winshuttle is not going to know that column 1 is denominator. It just knows that you entered data on column 1 of the screen. So let's take a look at what that looks like with the real recording. We'll go through that step by step on what that might look like here. So let's bring up our transaction script for MM17. Okay, and I have an example here of some information we're going to load. So I have my material, I have my unit of measure, my numerator and denominator. Now I'm doing length, width, height, unit of dimension, so it's going to be measure all of these items in meters, volume, and then my unit of volume is going to be cubic meters. So in prep for this, I'm just doing one at a time, but if I had a number of items I needed to do, like maybe pack or case, whatever the alternate units of measure may be, bottle, just because you're doing a mass update Tcode, we're still going to do one row at a time, just like you're used to transaction doing. It's going to do MM17, MM17, MM17. Just like any other Tcode, it's going to do one at a time. So you don't necessarily need to worry about Gui Scripting in this case, and we'll go through this now in a step-by-step fashion. Okay, so I think everything is set up here. Make sure I'm out of the material. It looks like I am. Okay. It should be logging in here, and hopefully I don't have too many SAP windows open. All right, looks like it should be popping up here. All right, so I already have a predefined variant name. So my variant name is just hard-coded into the script. Now, if you wanted to make the variant come from Excel because you have multiple variants or something that you want to use, by all means you can do that. So I have this predefined variant for alt unit of measure. Brings in my material and my alternate unit of measure, and then loads the information in the columns here. So doesn't give us a good view, but you can see the numerator, denominator, the length, all of this information is coming from my Excel file. So I'm not using the mass update Tcode as we would normally do conventionally. We have a whole list of materials here, and we put some information we want to mass update, we push it down, and then we'd save all of those items. We're just doing a one-at-a-time approach. So again, if you have 50 items in your Excel file, you need to update 50 alternate units of measure, this method is very handy at doing that because you don't need to worry about what line item you're on. So now I get the little green message that everything was successful, and that little green light actually has a value with it as well, which is a value of 1, meaning it was successful. There were no errors during the load because the actual log message itself is not too helpful in this particular case. So you can download that light. 1 is good, 0 is a warning or failure. But that's the idea. So using that Tcode, let's go take a look at our material now and see if that guy got in there. Sure enough, Beryl did. So I didn't have to worry about what row I was on. So this is a unique way to get around some of the Gui scripting problems. Okay, so again, you have to have access to that Tcode, MM17 to do that, or whoever's going to run it needs to have access. But you've eliminated the need for Gui scripting, and you've eliminated the problem of not using Gui scripting and getting stuck when you have 12 line items. And the same can be said for many different things. So when we look at the mass update Tcode, there's also the ability to mass update descriptions. So if we look at this, KT is in here, material descriptions. So on the material descriptions, we have a very similar problem. Now we have many descriptions in here. If I wanted to add a new description, I would have no idea. Without Gui scripting, I would have no idea where the first row would be. So I have to use Gui scripting to do that. And plus, if I needed to change a description, I would not know whether French was, row 7 or row 2. I'd have to hunt row by row for it and have my script do it. And that would work fine unless your description was not on the first page. So if you have to scroll down to get, whatever language SH is referring to, you wouldn't be able to find it. So that mass update Tcode is good in that sense too, because you can change any description or any unit of measure in this table without having to use Gui scripting to go find it. Just use the mass update Tcode and just update 1. And that's how you can use mass update Tcodes to handle many of these types of items. So another common issue that we see with Gui scripting is around long text. So sometimes long text works. We know that transaction has the ability to record long text in certain recording modes, but even in those recording modes, it doesn't always work for certain transactions. The long text is not always very user-friendly with Winshuttle on those long text recording modes. One of those examples is the purchase order. So we're going to take a look at long text on purchase orders and take a look at some different ways to manage that. So let's see if I have a purchase order up here. I sure do. So let's get out of this material. And we will bring over the purchase order screen. Okay, so this is an ME23. So I just went to ME23N, and I might be, I think I'm in view mode here. So that should be okay. So if we went into edit mode, and we have all of these texts. Let me go into edit mode here, and we have all of these texts that are optional to us. Now, long text recording doesn't work here, okay? And there's so many long texts, and we have this little hierarchy of text or little list of text. Winshuttle, unless you're going to use Gui scripting, and maybe not even then in this case, you have to select the right text. So if you're not using Gui scripting, you won't have that ability. It's just going to be stuck at the first one. Now, fortunately, in this case, for purchase orders, the most common texts are header text and then item text, and those are the first ones. So you can use it. Again, the long text won't work, but you could still enter line by line into those first ones. But if you want to enter a header note or deadlines or any of these other items, you're not going to be able to do that unless you have Gui scripting. Okay, so let's look at the next option, and that's going to lead us to the next poll that we have. So let's take a look at the polls here one more time. And we're going to launch this one. Okay, so we are focused on all desktop tools, and Direct is a tool that Winshuttle offers to interact with DAPIs. So I just want to ask, how many people have used Direct, how many people have not, and maybe didn't even know it existed. Let's take a minute here to look at that. Okay, everyone has voted. That's That's good. So let's close that poll, and we'll share the results. All right, so it's almost the same number of percentage splits as the last time, except we have 67% no, so 2/3 of the folks don't have or have never used direct, and a quarter of people have, and we have a few users that don't even have the option of using it. So we're going to talk about using direct as a way to enhance or eliminate the Gooey scripting requirement. So let's go ahead and close that poll. Let me get out of change mode here on this purchase order. And we're going to bring up direct. So using direct, let's see if I have it up here. Fortunately, I did not open it beforehand. So direct is a way to interact with BAPIs. All right, I enter our central address. Hopefully it'll take my password today. Could not find the website. Okay, so it looks like it's coming up here. So I'm by no means a BAPI expert. I've never designed a BAPI. I've never done any configuration with BAPIs, but I know direct is the tool that I can use as a Winshuttle user to help interact with BAPIs. And thank goodness for Google and all the people that write articles about what BAPIs are out there, because that's how I learn about all of these things, and just by experience. So when you're using a BAPI or function module, we have to load it in here. So the one that we're going to use is BAPI PO change. So with this BAPI, we're going to have the ability to update many things about a purchase order. We can change text, we can add items, we can change things about items. So this is sort of like an automated interface to help manage purchase orders. So we're going to take a look at that. We have to log into SAP to go get the definition of that. We're not going to go through the creation of this, but I just want to show you how a little bit of the setup works. And again, fortunately, there's a lot of information out there on the internet about some of these BAPIs and how to use them and what the details mean. Sometimes you'll get lucky enough, and there will be documentation within your SAP environment that SAP has provided that you can look at through the direct tool. There's an option to look at documentation. So it's extracting information from there. And the way direct interacts with transaction, you're not recording yourself doing a transaction. You're going to be using transaction to execute the BAPI, but you're not using transaction to record the BAPI. So that's what direct is about. So we're using direct, we're entering in the BAPI or the remote function module that we're going to be using, and it just brings back all the tables and all the fields that are involved in that BAPI. And then we pick and choose which one we're going to use. So it looks like it's a little slow here, so we'll move on past. But you have to understand how the BAPI works. The big thing is a commit required. Oftentimes everything will work except the data doesn't get saved. You might need to check that commit required. So here's an option to get module documentation. There's a whole bunch of information about it on the screen. BAPI documentation, for this one there is none. Okay, so sometimes you do get lucky and there's some documentation there, but we're going to go on and continue. And it's retrieving information about this BAPI. So in this case, my problem is I want to update text items. Okay, so I need to be able to update certain text. I need to add multiple items, and so on. So we're going to use direct to find the BAPI details. We're going to select the columns that we want, and then we'll move on. So as it's trying to bring this in, I do just want to give you a look and feel for how direct works, and then we'll switch back to transaction to run it. Okay, we're almost done here. Okay, so within a BAPI is basically a bunch of tables that contain columns you want to use. So there's the tables, and there's also some structures, and then there's output structures as well. So again, the key is understanding a little bit how direct works, and then maybe you have someone on staff, an ABAPer or a basis person that can help guide you with the BAPI. Otherwise, you just left up to your own devices to search out on the internet to pick what you need to do. But oftentimes the X, you have to go in here and just select the item. But the X means you're going to update it or you're going to interact with that. So if the condition header X, you're going to pick the columns that you're going to interact with that also contain the X, item number X. Okay, then you can bring in the header, and you see item numbers there again. So the X just means, hey, I'm going to interact with this field. And then you have to go back to oftentimes to the table without the X to pull in the field itself. So that's a little bit of a background about why do I see things twice, one with the X, one without. So the X just means, again, I'm going to interact with this field, almost like in transaction when you check the checkbox to enable it. And then when you go to table without the X, that's where you're going to provide the value for that field you're going to interact with. So you have all sorts of information. You have header information, you have item information, there's text information as well. So PO, item, there should be one for text down here. So you have text at the header level, text at the item level. Okay, so you can select the tables that you need, select the columns that you need. So you can see very clear here, what's the PO number going to be, the item. These are things that you're very familiar with the purchase order. What's the purchase order number, the purchase order item, what text ID. So the text ID is what type of text are you going to update. You want the header text, you want the detail text, which one of these texts on the screen here are you going to try to load. All right, so after you've defined your direct BAPI, you save that, and then you switch over to transaction. Okay, so I have one open here already to change an item text, and I have one here to change header text. So after you save your BAPI or your direct script, instead of recording a script, I'll use this one as an example since we're done with this one. Okay, I'm going to create a new recording within transaction. But I'm going to select fields from a direct template. So I'm not going to do a Tcode. I'm going to select the direct template that I'm going to use. Then I have to go find that direct script or direct file that I just loaded, just created with direct. So after you do that, this is what it looks like. It just brings in the table. So every table is likely going to have this loop around it, or you have the ability to do looping if you wanted to. But in this case, we're setting up this script to do header text changes. So I need to know the purchasing document number, so the purchase order number, the item number, the text ID, and then the text line. So we're going to show you an example of how this works. So for header text, if I wanted to go in here and change this text item, and like I said, if I was not using Gooey Scripting, I would be able to update header text already because it's the first one. But if I wanted to update deadlines, I would be stuck unless I had Gui Scripting. So that's what this BAPI is going to be about, using this transaction script that's with direct in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Run now. There's no step-by-step options with direct because you're not interacting with screens. You're sort of interacting with an interface to put data in the table. So let me bring up some information here on this purchase order. I'm going to put in the purchase order number, the top level. I need to put it at the detail level. And since I'm dealing with a header, the header item, there's no line item for a header, so that you have to put in the 5 zeros. I'm going to put in the text ID. The text ID F01 means header text. Again, I only found that out by using Google. All right, and you can add multiple lines here. So this is entering text at a line-by-line basis. So you can have up to 72 characters of text on each one of these lines. So I'm going to do F01 again. So it's the same text. This is header. And we'll go and give that a shot. Hopefully everything will work out okay. All right, so if we look at our STO right now, there's no text item at the header text level. If there was text on any of these, there would be a checkbox like we see down here. So this one has item text, but there is no text up here. So we will wait for our transaction script to finish up. Okay, I can tell the excitement is pending. Okay, so looks, no message is returned from SAP. That's okay. We don't get a good logging from that. But let's take a look at what happened on the screen here. So I'm going to refresh this a little bit. And we should see a checkbox pop in here momentarily. All right, I might have to exit and come back into this PO. Okay, so there we go. We get the checkbox that says try this text. This is line 2. So we got both of our lines. Now, depending on how you want to view it, we do get the 2 lines. So depending on how you want to view it as a line editor or the continuous text, where it just puts all your lines together. So this BAPI can help you do that long text. So we'll do one more instance and try to get deadlines in there as well. So this is something that, like I said, header text we could do, but deadlines we wouldn't be able to do unless we had Gooey Scripting. So let's give it one more shot with the header text. So we're going to put in F04. We'll give it 2 lines as well. And I think we should be able to put text in that deadline one. We'll give it a shot. Okay, so in this case, F01 was header text, and just going down, it ends up being an incrementing number. So F02, F03, F04, and the other ones, so F05. So once you try to find the letter, oftentimes everything going down is just incrementing by 1. So we'll see if we get some deadlines loaded here. Okay, no message returned from SAP. Let's see if any texts appear for us. Okay, I might have to reload again. Okay, so there's our deadline text. So using direct and interacting with Tcodes that generally need to use Gui Scripting, using a BAPI is very powerful. It can do many things with this, especially the BAPI PO create. It can manage almost any of this information on the screen. So if you're dealing with line items, you can add line items. All sorts of things that you can do with BAPIs that sometimes you can't get done with a Tcode on its own right. So those are the 2 main topics I wanted to cover, to get away from Gui Scripting. Because as I said, if you're a foundation user or you're using the integration server to schedule jobs, coming out with 11.1, you're no longer going to be able to use Gui Scripting on the integration server. Again, you'll still be able to use it if you're just running transaction from your desktop. But I thought this was a timely session to talk about other ways to get around Gui Scripting. All right, so those were the 2 topics I wanted to cover today. So let's go on down to see if there are any discussion questions. Do we have any questions out there right now? We do have one. Let's see if I can get to it here. How do you know you need to use BAPI PO change was the question. So the answer was just sort of by understanding. I would go to Google here. Let's bring that up. I'd say BAPI to update PO texts. And the first one, BAPI PO change. So basically just searching. Again, I'm no expert at understanding, how many BAPIs there are out there. Now, oftentimes you'll have a basis person that's familiar with the BAPIs, and they'll be able to tell you. But there's a lot of information out there on the SAP space about BAPIs. So if you need to understand, what are the options are, basically, if you have a resource in-house, that's great. Otherwise, there's a lot of information out there on the internet, and that's the answer that I came up with. I didn't know this was available until I just searched for BAPIs. So when I get stuck, like Gui Scripting, we can't do that with this customer. I'm going to BAPI, create materials. Okay. So BAPI to create materials, and then you could search, and there might be a couple BAPI materials save data. So that might be a good one to use. Can you update a material master or extend it? And then the trick is understanding, what tables to use and what codes. But again, a lot of that has been dealt with by other people much more intelligent on BAPIs than I. But that's the answer for that question. Hopefully that helps. But yeah, it's just a little bit of trial and error and asking people in the community like we have here today. Are there any other questions out there? I'll just give a second. Oh, all right, there was one more. If I'm using transaction to extract and save long text, is there a way to save it as Word rather than rich text or HTML? So you should be able to download long text to an Excel file. So if you're using Query to get long text, you should be able to download it into an Excel file. So long text, a lot of long text is stored within the tables STXL, I believe, and XTXH. Let's see if we can bring up Query real quick to do that. But most of that information is stored directly in those tables. So when you're the only way to download, if you're going to use a BAPI, you should be able to download text out of that way. I know there are a couple BAPIs out there to do that. But as far as using Query, I believe that information is stored in those two tables. So you can't get it with SE16 because it's all encrypted in the back end. So you need to use Query to go get it because it'll run the decryption on the way down and you can store it in Excel. So if you're going to use Query, and that's what I have to do most of the time, is use Query to go get the existing data, manipulate it, and then send it back up either with a direct script through transaction or Tcode directly using the long text. One key thing to understand about long text is that if you're going to use a regular transaction script, using the long text upload, it overwrites the data that is there if you're using the long text option. So the best way to do that is to first download it. You have to maintain it. You can maintain it in Excel and then upload it. So as far as using long text, yeah, you can get it with Excel using Query, and then you can just manage it from Excel going forward. So let's take a quick peek to see if I was right with the tables. It's STXL maybe. So there we go. So that's the detail, XTXL, and STXS is the header. So again, you need to know that text ID, that we were just talking about with PO text, where we gave it a text ID of F01, and that header text for a PO. You still need to understand your text ID. You can provide it a language to make sure you're getting that correctly. Okay, so we have some more questions here. What is the difference between Winshuttle Connect and Winshuttle Central? Okay, that's a very good question. So both tools are used to manage your licenses. Okay, so let's see if I can get into our Winshuttle environment here. Let me bring that up. All right, log in here. All right, so as I was logging in, so both Winshuttle Connect and Central are used to manage licenses within your organization. Connect is a website-based offering. There's nothing that you need to have on site to manage your licenses with Connect. It's offered for free by Winshuttle. You just say, hey, we want to use Connect. Now, if you're on node locked, that's no longer supported, or network keys. So if you want to switch users, you're sort of stuck because Winshuttle is not going to help you out with those. You need to migrate to Connect or Central. So Connect is a web-based platform that's offered for free, and it's all hosted on Winshuttle's site. They will give you space just for your company and load your licenses there. You have to have a license administrator for both tools, but for Connect, everything is managed by email address. Since this service is offered outside of your network, you authenticate your licenses by using an email address. So when you're logging on, when you're opening transaction, you saw me, I provided my Central address, I provided my Windows username and password. That's because Central is generally on-premise or on your network, even if it's hosted by somebody else, maybe the servers are somewhere else. It's accessible by your network. You log in with your Windows credentials. But from a Connect perspective, it's all done by email. You know, your company is set up with a space, and you authenticate by email. So if you want to reassign licenses with Connect, you log in as an administrator to Connect. You uncheck a checkbox by one name, take their license away, you type in another user's email address, and you give them a license. So that's how Connect works. Very basic license management. You also have the ability to do some ROI calculations. Connect does monitor who's doing what Tcodes, how often, what the volume is, and things like that. So there is some traceability with that, but it's primarily used as your licensing management tool. Okay. Central, again, does that same thing. It's a SharePoint-based site that is connected to your network. You know, whether it's hosted or not hosted, you have to be able to access it from your network using your Windows username and password. So it does many of those things that Connect does. Well, it does everything that Connect does from a licensing management perspective. You can manage your license through the central administration portal. So manage licenses. Click on manage licenses. You have all of the licenses available for you. We have 3 Enterprise Studio, 1 is available. We have 2 professional that are still available out of the 3. I just pick a product, and I can assign the product to someone else. So maybe I'll do, maybe we have an admin account. I think we just have a test account, and I can assign that test account a username license because they're already signed another license. Okay, so I can't assign that one, but that's the ability to, you just type in the user's window name, hit assign. Maybe I'll take Tom's away real quick, and then I can give it back to him. I can assign that license. So license management is done through both tools. Very easy to use. One's web-based by Winshuttle, the other one's sort of accessible. But the great thing about Central is that you have a central place to manage your scripts. Central is also providing a governance platform around your scripts. So if you're using Connect, your scripts are residing somewhere, you know, on your network, on people's desktops, on a network shared drive, wherever it may be, you know, Dropbox, wherever your scripts are, they're sort of uncontrolled. You don't know if people are using the right versions. People have them on the desktop that's outdated. You find people loading data wrong because they're using the wrong version. So it's sort of from a script perspective, it's a wild west. You know, you can record scripts against production. There's nothing stopping you with Connect. You know, your production environment is just another environment that Winshuttle can connect to. So it's a little bit of a wild west scenario from script management, script creation. So when you use Central, Central provides that governance from a script management perspective as well. So you see we have our transaction scripts here. In order for you to run a transaction script when you're using Central, that script must have a production status. It must have a production status in order for you to run that script against your production environment. So there are other management tools in application servers. You define what your environments are, and you can set them up as production or non-production. Now, so that's how Winshuttle knows when I point to M27, that M27 is a non-production environment. So it's going to allow a developer to test and create scripts against the non-production environment. But if a developer tries to create a script against the production environment, it's going to say, you can't do that. M27 is a production environment. So it provides that governance around what you can do in what environments. It also provides a mechanism for having an approval process for your scripts. So instead of just anyone creating a script, putting it out there and having a runner use it, you know, like I said, every script has to have that production status. So a developer would have to submit their script to Central, and there's a little mini workflow that kicks off to allow someone to review it. You know, they can reject it or approve it, and once it's approved, it gets that production status. So what you do with that approval process, it's a very simple workflow from a Winshuttle Central perspective, but it gives you the ability to know, is there a script that already does this out there? Did you use the right naming conventions? Did you provide the documentation that shows that you actually tested this thing? You know, where's your test data? Did the customer sign off? So you have the ability to provide, you know, change management around your scripts. And above all that, it has version control. So when you publish another version of the script, when people go get it from Central, when they point to Central and go get that script, they're always using the latest and greatest. So you don't have to worry about version issues, telling everyone to go get the new version. rogue copies on desktops and things like that. It does all that script migration or that management for you. People always get the latest versions. And if you find a version isn't working, you can always roll back. So everything is version controlled. You don't lose other versions by creating a new one. It's just SharePoint version control. You can roll back if necessary. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a highlight on that. There are many more things that Central can do with regards to management of scripts, who can use it, what features they can do with the tool, and so forth. But that's the primary difference between Central and Connect. Most do license management. Central does a lot more. Okay, so let's see if we have any other questions. All right, and that seems to be the end of the questions here. So thank you again for joining. I do want to just throw one shout out to Justin, who's going to be doing our WEBtips in April. So Justin does our forms and workflow for right now. The next session is going to be on April 21st. They are different webinars because not everybody has the forms and workflow tool, so we don't want to make everyone sign up for things they don't have or want to see. But if you're interested, just send us a note, and we can get you that link for the forms and workflow one as well. Again, they're every other month, forms and workflow, and the other months we do the desktop tools. Okay, so that wraps up our session for today. Thanks for joining, and please send comments of things you want to see because we're running out of ideas. We've been doing this for a couple years, so sometimes we throw in repeats because we have different customers and folks joining from week to week. But if there's something that you want to see, send us a note so we can get that out there and have that available next month as a tip and trick. Or if there's anything cool that you've done that you want to share, that works as well. All right, so thanks for joining today, and have a great day, and happy St. Patrick's Day.